Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all well. This is where I talk about the books that I'm reading. I like to read diverse books and I highlight Canadian literature. If you are new, thanks so much for checking out my channel. Please hit subscribe and stick around. Today I am going to be talking about all of the books that I read in June and July. I am trying to get this video out before August, before it's over. Plus, this is going to help bring my TBR stack down a little since it's currently sitting at 1,530. So let's see where we end up. Actually, just before we get to stats and the books, I keep forgetting to mention this, but I had the opportunity to meet another booktuber, and I realized that just because this was a few days before my mom had passed, this kind of got lost in the shuffle. But I always love seeing when booktubers gather and meet. So I wanted to share that I met Laureen from Books at the Bottom of the Stairs. We met up at the beginning of June. Laureen and her husband were driving through Alberta on their way back to Nova Scotia. And we met and had lunch and just enjoyed a lovely visit. So thanks again for taking the time, Laureen, to stop and visit. It was great to meet you in person. Okay, now we can take a look at some stats. So in June, my top moods seem to not only describe my reading, but also my life. So they were mysterious, emotional, and dark. Those were the top three moods. That does pretty much sum up my June, but that's followed by reflective, hopeful, and funny, which again, much like my life in June. And then the last three moods for my reading was tense, challenging, and adventurous. So for the pace of the books, it was not surprising, mostly medium at 78%, then 11% for both slow and fast. I read 88% fiction and 12% nonfiction, and I think that's about normal for me. I thought the genres were interesting. The top three genres, according to Storygraph, were thriller, romance, and contemporary. This was followed by mystery, horror, and fantasy. Then LGBTQIA2S+, magical realism, and memoir. So those seem pretty eclectic, which I like. And then my overall average rating in June was 3.89. So that's not too bad. For July, I seem to stay pretty consistent with the moods. The top moods are reflective, emotional, tense, funny, dark, and challenging. July was also consistent with pace. It was 100% medium. A little more nonfiction this month, but fiction was still at 80% and nonfiction 20%. The genres seemed a little more in my comfort zone, I would say, with literary, contemporary, memoir, and historical. My average rating in July was a little lower than June at 3.79 stars. Still not bad though. Okay, so let's get to the books. The first book that I'm going to mention I read for the reading project that I am doing with AJ from AJ Dunn. We are doing Tuesdays with Toni, and we're reading all of Toni Morrison's novels in publication order. AJ finished this project a long time ago, and I have now finished Home by Toni Morrison. I still have to put out videos for the last two books that I read, and I have one more book to go, so stay tuned for those videos where I will go into more details. I'll talk about them more in depth, and I will be finishing up this project very soon, hoping maybe before August ends, if not definitely in September. So finishing this brings the TBR stack to 1,529. Next, I have two books that I read for the Reading Across Canada book club. And first is Cold by Drew Hayden Taylor. This is the newest publication from Drew Hayden Taylor, and the first book that I've read by him, even though I have other books on my shelf by him. This story starts with a plane crash. 2 women are stranded in the cold. One of them leaves to go get help. The other is quite injured, like badly injured. So at this point, I'm thinking the story is going to be about adventure and survival. But then another storyline is introduced, and we meet a professor of Indigenous studies. And he's having an affair with one of his students. It seems that these 2 storylines aren't related at all, but then people are brutally murdered. And there are some very gruesome scenes. I mean, it is considered a horror book. Plus, the author was not afraid, I will say this, to kill off people that it kind of surprised me who he chose, which is also shocking to the professor. And he starts to think that whoever or whatever is killing might actually be after him. Eventually, these 2 storylines collide, and we find out the connection between the plane crash and this professor. So this is an Indigenous Wendigo story that has, it has stayed with me, and I have heard rumblings of a sequel. So if that's true, then I would definitely check out the sequel. The next book that we read for the Reading Across Canada book club was Grazie by Lucia Frangione. This is one of those books that if it hadn't been for the Reading Across Canada book club, I would never have heard of this. I would never known that the book exists. I would never have heard of this author. This is one of those rare times that a more obscure book is interesting and sparked a really good conversation for the book club. So when I first started the book, I was a little worried because it was making me feel uncomfortable. The main character, before we know that her name is Grazie, she refers to herself as a walrus. She refers to her daughter as a nut. And it was very uneasy. I didn't know if I wanted to continue, but I'm so glad that I did. So the other part that kind of bugged me was that the little girl, the daughter, is kind of annoying at first, and the book is told from alternating perspectives, including hers. And her perspective is not easy in the beginning. The character development in this book, I think, is very well done, and you see how everyone changes. So I will give you a little bit of a synopsis here. Grazie is the main character. She's not well when the book begins, and she's told that a man that she used to know when she was younger, that he has died. And this news really changes everything for Grazie, and she knows that she needs help. So she goes to a psych ward. Her daughter is now being taken care of by her grandfather, who I have to say, I adored him. His character is very well written, and I loved the relationship that they had. So over time, we watch as these relationships change and grow, and we learn about Grazie and how she begins to take care of herself. So secrets come out, and healing is able to begin. I thought that this was really quite a lovely story. So with those 2 books, that brings the TBR to 1,527. Next I have what I'm going to call my summer reads. And first I continued a series. I know, who am I? I'm not one to really read series. But this one, you can read the books as standalones as well. And that kind of series, it seems to really work for me. I realized I only grabbed one of the books, but the first one was Yours Truly by Abby Jiminez, which is the second book in the Part of Your World series. So if you are familiar with the first book, then this book has Bree or Brianna from the first book. and the main couple from the first book, also make an appearance. Do you need to know all that before? No, you do not. So you don't have to read the first book. But if you do, then you would be familiar with these characters. Brianna is a doctor, and she meets Jacob, who is a new doctor at her hospital. And Jacob's first day does not go well. He loses like 7 patients. And then he's a real jerk to Brianna when she tries to kind of talk to him about it. He realizes that he's been a jerk, and he writes her a letter. The old-fashioned way. He writes her a letter, and they continue to write letters or these notes to each other, getting to know each other, and this is kind of the you've got mail kind of idea. So the other thing that's going on here is that Bree's brother is very sick and needs a kidney transplant. So that is kind of the more serious topic in this book. So there's a bit of a fake couple trope, maybe a friends to lovers trope. I really enjoyed what I think I always enjoy with Abby Jiminez's books, and that's the humor and the witty banter. She does those both very, very well. And it also includes the dual perspective that she does well with that too. So you always know what's going on with, from both people. So that brings me to Just for the Summer by Abby Jiminez. And this is the 3rd book in the Part of Your World series. It is Abby Jiminez's latest publication. And I read these back to back, which, means that I have now read all of her novels. I know she has some short stories either out or coming out, but I haven't really been compelled to read those. Anyway, Just for the Summer also has the dual perspectives. It starts off with Justin, who has noticed a pattern in his dating life. It seems that every girl that he dates, after they break up with him, that girl finds her match. So this dilemma gets out on social media, and Emma messages him saying that she has the same problem. Every time that she breaks up with a guy, the next woman that guy meets ends up, being the one. So Justin and Emma begin kind of chatting back and forth, and they decide that if they were to date each other, then it would mean that the next person they both met would be the one. So they decide to date each other just for the summer. And the curse, that's what you want to call it, that would be taken care of. So this little experiment gets more complicated, I'm sure you can imagine. And this book includes heavier topics like mental health, trauma, and I'd say difficult family dynamics. I rated the books in the Part of Your World series. I think I rated them all 4 stars. But in her Friend Zone series, I rated 2 of the books 5 stars, and I think the third book 4 stars. So Abby Jiminez has a pretty good track record with me, and I really look forward to seeing what else that she publishes next. So my 3rd summer read was One Italian Summer by Rebecca Serle. This is the 2nd book that I've read by her because I was first introduced to her with In 5 Years, which I really enjoyed. Her books, or at least the 2 that I've read, have a bit of magical realism, and it's just done in the perfect way for me that I find easy to suspend reality and just escape into them. So One Italian Summer is set in Italy, so it had me with that since I love Italy. It is about Katie, who is grieving the death of her mother. They had planned a mother-daughter vacation together, and Katie's mother had always talked about the summer that she spent in Positano before she met Katie's father. So Katie's mother, planned on showing Katie this place that was so special to her. And Katie decides to go on the trip alone and immediately sees what her mother saw in this beautiful place. And then the unthinkable happens. Katie sees her mother. And it's her mother, but she's a younger version of herself. So it's as though Katie has stepped back into the summer that her mother has always talked about. So Katie befriends her and begins to know her mother in a new way. And I just thought that this was well done. It was a perfect escape for me. And I did read it while I was driving to Ontario for my own mother's funeral. So, maybe that helped in this. But if you enjoy magical realism like this, then I say it's worth checking out. Next up is a book that's been on my shelf for a while. It's The Divines by Ellie Eaton. And this is a dark academia story, and I believe it's a debut novel. This story is told in 2 timelines. The main character, Josephine, it's from the present time, and she's on her honeymoon with her husband. And then the past, which was in the 1990s, when Josephine attended an English boarding school. So the 1990s timeline was way more interesting in my opinion, and I found the going back and forth didn't always go smoothly. So in the beginning, the build-up was pretty good. Josephine has these flashbacks, or is recollecting her time at the boarding school, and there is a clear distinction between the haves and have-nots, and Josephine is upset when her roommate isn't someone that she would choose to be her roommate. And it doesn't take long before you know that something has happened. Something has happened at this school, but you don't know what. And at first, I really liked this. I enjoyed the suspense of it. Where this didn't come together for me was in the end. I think the ending could have been much more powerful, and instead it fell flat for me. So the writing is there. The writing was, I thought, really good, and I would be interested to see what else Ellie Eaton writes, because the book started out so strong, and I was really invested. So if you are interested in stories set in schools and campuses, about a year ago, I did a video about the 60 best campus novels. I think it was from the last 100 years. So I will link that below so you can have a look and check that out. Finally, the last summer read was Wahala by Nikki May. And this was brought to my attention by Ali from Ali Do As Read. And I put this on my TBR and talked about it in my first books I want to read because of you. Wahala is also a debut, and it is described as a Nigerian Sex and the City. It's set in London, England. So what I thought that meant was that this book would be about 4 women. It would be about their friendships, and there'd be some shenanigans along the way. And that's true, sort of. It's true that there are 4 women. They are mostly friends. 3 of them are friends for sure. The 4th one, Isabel, tries to be their friend, but I knew early on that she was trouble. And Ali makes a few more connections to Sex and the City that do make sense, but to me this book was very different. There was a mystery aspect, and I found it to be about some heavier topics, like about race and culture and how one navigates the world between these different cultures. I liked how the Nigerian culture was brought into the story, but also the tension between like having a foot in the 2 different cultures means that you are perceived differently. So that was all done very well. The mystery I found, was not shocking or anything like that. It wasn't suspenseful, but I guess it added a layer to the story. I thought the writing was good, and again, I would definitely be open and interested in reading more from Nikki May. So with those 5 summer reads, the TBR stack is now at 1,522. Next, I have nonfiction, and first is Madly, Deeply, The Diaries of Alan Rickman, by Alan Rickman, and edited by Alan Taulor. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Alan Rickman, but I was interested in learning more about him. And I was also interested in the fact that Alan Taulor was the editor, because he is also one of the editors of a book that I've been reading for years, The Assassin's Cloak. It's an anthology of the world's greatest diarists. So this book is divided by year, and it was very interesting to remember some of the events that took place and to see it through Alan Rickman's eyes. His thoughts are very clear, very concise. He doesn't belabor any point. He is matter of fact, and his humor is very dry. In some cases, especially with celebrity memoirs, it can feel like they are name dropping. And part of it is this is their life and their circle of people. In the case of Alan Rickman, there are definitely well-known names, but you can tell that they are cherished friends or that he has respect for these people. And when he doesn't, you know that too. I also appreciated that he would talk about the films that he saw and make comments about them. And these are films that we would all know. And it really was like walking down memory lane, in a lot of ways. So there are photos included in the middle of the book. Maybe I will take pictures and show you, because this is actually a pretty heavy book. But what I really loved and wish there was more of are pictures of the actual pages of Alan's diary. So I will put some pictures of it up for you. They are creative, artistic, and fun. And I'm sure that these pages aren't the only ones. And it's too bad that we couldn't see, what the diary looked like as a whole this way. But if you are interested in learning more about Alan Rickman, then this, I would say, is a good book to check out. The next book is a memoir, Me, Myself, They, Life Beyond the Binary by Luna Ferguson. I know you will see a different name on the cover, but the author now goes by Luna. So I talked about this when I recommended books for the Reading Across Canada Challenge for June. And Rebecca had done a video recommending books to different booktubers, and this is what she recommended to me. And I happened to have it on my shelf unread, so I decided to read it for the June prompt of the Reading Across Canada Challenge. This memoir reads fairly easily. It's kind of a mix between significant moments and people in Luna Ferguson's life that helped them come to understand themselves and help identify, who they are. As you can imagine, this wasn't easy, and people were not always kind. I really enjoyed the book because I think that stories, these experiences, they need to be told. And this book felt like it was a mix between a memoir and a how-to guide in some ways on like how to support someone who might be going through something similar. There are some really good thoughts and ideas that you can take away from this and, put into action. But I almost wish that this hadn't been a memoir and more of a book on practical ways of being an ally and offering support, because I think the memoir has some very powerful moments, and Luna articulates thoughts and feelings well. But I think at least part of the goal was to teach people, and because it was a memoir, I wish that had been shown more rather than told. I hope that makes sense. Regardless, I rated this 4 stars because it is an important book. It's an important topic, and there are, many takeaways. So with these two nonfiction, that brings the TBR to 1,520. So next up, I have some more Canadian books for you. I'm going to start with a thriller, and this is A Noise Downstairs by Linwood Barclay. This book is about Paul, who has an encounter with a colleague, and when he realizes that the colleague has a dead body in his trunk, the colleague attempts to kill him, but Paul survives. This is not a spoiler. This is what happens in like the first few pages. So then the book moves forward, I think about 8 months. And we see how Paul is coping now. He is experiencing some PTSD, and his wife, trying to be supportive, gifts him with a typewriter so he can write a novel that he's always talked about. So this ends up sending Paul spinning, because every once in a while he can hear typing, and it wakes him up. He thinks he's going crazy, and no one else seems to hear it. His wife doesn't hear it, and again she's trying to console him, and then things get worse when Paul finds messages typed on the typewriter, and these messages seem to be from the dead woman that his colleague has killed. This book moves very quickly, which Barclay's novels tend to do that. And when things begin to be revealed, they went places I was not expecting. At one point, I remember just kind of going, oh, that's what's happening. And it wasn't like one thing was revealed and things fell into place. But it kind of kept coming until it all became clear. And I really liked this. If you are up for a fast-paced thriller, then I recommend this one for sure. So this next book is also listed as a thriller, but I would say more mystery. It didn't have that same fast pace as like A Noise Downstairs. But this is the debut novel Pull Focus by Helen Walsh. The main character in this story is Jane, who is working as, I think it's the director, for the Toronto Film Festival. It's a very big deal. Partly because she got the job because her boss is being brought down by sexual harassment charges. So there's a lot going on here. Just before the festival begins, Jane's partner disappears. The story feels very behind the scenes because you are kind of getting the inside scoop, in a way, of how the festival is run, which was very interesting. All of the moving parts and the logistics, and there are several side stories, perhaps too many side stories, that it sometimes felt that we were all over the place. Now, this might have been done intentionally, since that's how the main character was probably supposed to be feeling, overwhelmed and juggling so many different things, while also trying to keep it all together and be successful when she had many people and things going against her. And she also, though, and this is the cool part of the story, she also had people rooting for her. So I thought that the writing in this was good. Another debut author that I'd like to read more if they publish something else. So this would be good if you like workplace stories. It kind of reminded me a bit of The Herd by Andrea Bartz. It's different stories, but it had a similar feel. So if you've read that and liked that, then that would be good. So we are going to stick with the missing husband theme here. I think this is also a debut, and this is The Errant Husband by Elizabeth Haynes. So first, let's admire this cover. I love this cover. The book begins here in Calgary, but we end up traveling to Cuba, which is where Thelma's husband is doing some research for a novel. And when Thelma arrives in Cuba to meet her husband, he doesn't show up to get her. So she goes to the hotel. he's not at the hotel when she gets there. She's told that he checked out. So Thelma sets off to find him, meeting some very interesting characters along the way. This is very much a character-driven novel. A lot of time is spent inside Thelma's head. She has these flashbacks to her childhood, to her life with Wally, and then also to her father. So if you enjoy that kind of novel that in some ways, is more of a character study, then this would be good. The writing is good. This book has themes of marriage and love and loss. Again, another debut author that, I would read more if they publish more. So hopefully she publishes something else. Next up is Empire of Wild by Sherry DeMoline. This is a Métis Rogarous story, which, like Cold, was a Wendigo story. The main character, you might have already guessed it, has been searching for her husband for a year now. She believes that he is still alive, even though others have kind of given up on him, but she won't give up looking. And in her search, she meets a preacher at this revival tent meeting, and she also sees her husband Victor. But when she goes to talk to him, he doesn't seem to recognize her at all, and he says that he's Reverend Wolf. So the story is about Joan trying to figure out, what is really happening, and if she can free her husband, before it's too late. She brings in themes of colonialism, religion, and love, and I really liked Joan's strength and determination in this novel. So the final book that I read, which is very different than all the rest, was Pure Color by Sheila Heti. I was hesitant starting this because I had heard very mixed reviews, and this book was a very quick read. It's very philosophical, so I can see that if that's not your thing, then this book, it would be hard to get into. I quite liked it, even though I know I didn't understand everything, definitely. Myra, I think, is the main character, and when we learn that it takes place during the first draft of the world, I thought that was very interesting. So soon the first draft will be destroyed for a new world, and people need to be prepared. Myra's father has also died, and his soul now lives within her, and she continues to learn from him and be kind of in relationship with him. The writing is very poetic in a way, and there are some stunning lines. So it might be a strange book, but I wanted to take what I could from it, which was, how interconnected everything is, and not just in this time, but in all time. The themes of loss and grief, and figuring out how to live on with that grief, and knowing that some things are going to come, and to be prepared for it, like what will a new world be? And don't we think about this if we contemplate our own death or the death of a loved one? And, how do you prepare for something if you don't exactly know what you are preparing for, because you don't know exactly what to expect? See, this is the philosophy that goes around in circles. So there were many times in the book that it just made me think deeper. And as someone who has a degree in philosophy and enjoys thinking a little abstractly once in a while, this book was like candy. So with all of these books, that brings the TBR to a total of 2015. Okay, so Jax was asking to come up. So I said he could come up for this last little bit of the video. So that brings the TBR to a total of 2015 books. I will be doing my haul soon, so we will see that number climb a bit. But I think that the 2030 that we started with will be the highest that we see, as long as I can keep reading as much as I have been. So please let me know if you have read any of these, if you are interested in reading any of these. What were some of your favorite books of June and July? I know it's a long time to think back, but I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.